Welcome to today's episode of Owning Your Menopause. I'm very, very excited for today's guest. She is an absolute force of nature. She is an OBE, is a serial entrepreneur, investor, author, and an unstoppable advocate for women in business. She is was the founder of Love Home Swap, which she scaled and sold, co-founder of the Global Women's Network, and now co-chair of the UK Invest in Women Task Force. Basically, if it's about empowering women at work, in wellness, or with their wealth, she is leading the charge. Her latest venture, The Better Menopause, is rooted in her own journey through midlife and is all about giving women the support, tools, and knowledge they need to thrive during this transition. She's all about grit, grace, and serious graft. And today we're diving into her story, resilience, and what it really means to embrace and own this next chapter. I am so excited to have Debbie Wosskow here today with me and have this conversation, which I think is going to be so inspiring for so many women. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Wow, we did the full wiki.
Yes, I know. And you kind of get that thing where it's like, go with this, go with that. And I was like, right. Because also I think it's really important to say we have met. And, I feel like we've become friends in this space. And you really are, when I've seen you on panels and when I talk to you, it's so evident that your passion to help women, empower women, is there. It's not just a series of kind of accolades of your own brilliant successes, but actually that championing that you have for other women. So on behalf of women, thank you. I'm going to go with my first question. I'm going to go back a little bit to the beginning, I guess, kind of taking in what we sort of spoke about before you came on. But what was, what has been your background to getting you here? Like, what do you feel, going way back perhaps, has been your driving force to creating what you are still creating and doing?
It's funny, isn't it? Life is better understood with an awful lot of hindsight, I think. And there's nothing like doing two things to make you really focus on why you are the way you are and what's made you make the choices that you've made in your life. And for me, they were writing a book and doing a lot of therapy, both of which make you really reflect on your own personal sweep of history. So I think a few things are factors in my upbringing that I think have had a serious impact on my career. The first is that I'm from an immigrant family, a Jewish immigrant family to the UK, where everybody in my family was an entrepreneur. They would never have used that word because it was a very fancy word, but they were business owners and the businesses were extremely humble. And I grew up around that being normal. I didn't have anybody in my extended family that did a job, so that wasn't conventional. And we talked about money in an extremely un-English way all the time because we were only really a generation out of poverty. So I think that absolutely normalizes conversations about what it costs to buy something and what you can sell it for from a very young age. And the second thing is that the women in my family all worked and they all had a lot of children. So I'm one of a part of a vast sweeping matriarchy is the way that I like to describe it. My mother had a business, my grandmother had a business, and they also had a lot of kids. I'm one of 7, depending on how you cut the various divorcing and remarrying. And I have a lot of sisters. So to the point on my why, I think I had no sense that it wasn't possible for a woman to run a business and be a mum, because that's all I'd ever known or seen in my very extended family. I didn't feel like entrepreneurialism or business ownership or doing it for yourself was risky because everybody I knew did that. And me and my sisters are a tribe. I do have a brother as well, and he's important, but So I think this sense of fairness and sisterhood has been a powerful part of my life from the very beginning. I also think that I was very much taught two things as a child, and I really reflect on this with my own kids. The first is stand for something. So we're a sort of family of people who are good on their feet, who are used to taking a view and who are used to really putting their head above the parapet and being heard. So stand for something feels important. And the second thing is that the higher you climb, the harder the wind blows. And so I've always had quite a good hard hat, or a rhino hide, as I refer to it in the book that I wrote with Anna, my Albright co-founder. And I certainly wasn't born with that, but that's something that I've had to develop over time. So I think family and sisterhood, literal sisterhood, as in my sisters, and matriarchy. And I always say I am the latest in a long line of proudly difficult women. We are. And I think that so much of that I never thought about, I took for granted. But actually, I think it has made many of my career choices, which have seemed quite risky or unusual, to start a business at 25. I've only been in gainful employment for 4 years of my life, and I'm now 51. I think they were really normalised by my environment and by seeing women do it, and those women not having mum guilt. I don't suffer from that, Kate. I really don't. That's not part of my makeup. I think that I am doing the right thing for my career, and I'm doing the right thing to build a life for me and the kids. And I don't have existential crises about that. And I honestly think that's because I've always seen women do it.
I love that. And I'm going to come back to that, because I think that's a massive barrier for a lot of women, because we feel we should be a certain way. It's been, dictated. It's funny because I would say that my background is very similar to yours. Both my parents came from from very humble backgrounds. My dad worked very, very hard, but became a senior lawyer in a firm at a very young age. My mother founded businesses, and again, growing up like you, I was part of that working world. A mother in a film business that was very male orientated, and she definitely ruled the roost there. Quick question: are the rest of your sisters as driven as you are as well? Is it?
And we're a kind of interesting bunch. So my next sister down is a psychotherapist, but she's an entrepreneurial psychotherapist. So she owns psychotherapy centres that she's built up and scaled. I have a sister in Australia. I have a sister who's an academic, but an entrepreneurial academic. My brother, Ben, my lone brother, worked with me in Love Home Swap and built that business with me, and I would never have been able to do it without him. So I think as families go, we have a lot in common. I am the eldest, and that means I've got kind of eldest child syndrome probably I take the biggest swings, I would say, and that's often the role of the eldest. But I think if you look across my sibling group, we haven't had conventional careers. We've done a lot of it ourselves, and I think some of that's in the water and the environment.
I love that. What lately? I mean, you've obviously created thousands of business. I say thousands, supported thousands of business and women. What's felt like the most purpose-driven one for you lately?
So I suppose that the turning point for me really was in my Love Home Swap life. So the quick arc of my entrepreneurial life, I built an agency business called Mantra, which I started when I was 25. I sold in 2007. I launched Love Home Swap, which was inspired by the film The Holiday, which shows that inspiration can strike at any time, even when you're watching a bit of a crappy rom-com on a plane. And I scaled that up to a big exit in 2017. And then I think what happened then, and I think about this a lot. I think about how anything good that's ever happened in my life has been because of a chance encounter. I don't just mean romantically. Actually, my biggest romances, non-sexual romance, has been with amazing women. But in 2017, I went to a party that I nearly didn't go to, and someone I didn't really know introduced me to Anna Jones, who at the time was the CEO of Hearst. And she's been my great sort of corporate love affair, I suppose. We co-created Albright together. We have the Perimenopause together, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I just love her. She's an amazing woman. She makes me laugh. She's the yin to my yang, and she's just made the last decade of my work life fun, even when it's been shit. And I think that those conversations, and it's a version of a conversation I've probably had with you, and I've had with loads of different women, but I think there's probably the slight difference with AJ and I is we kind of egg each other on to take action. That is back in 2017 to 2018 when we co-founded Albright. Where are all the women? The reason that this chance encounter at a party is so powerful is that there aren't very many female CEOs of significance. There aren't female CEOs with young kids. Our kids were younger then, it was 10 years ago. that actually the combined sort of wind beneath our wings of Me Too and the first era of Trump made us feel very strongly that female networks needed to be better, because both of us had been very good at achieving in men's worlds, in different worlds. So I always say this, and I think it's really true, that if I were to boil down the singular reason for my career success is that I'm really good at asking men for money. Because if I wasn't, I wouldn't have raised capital for my businesses. In AJ's world, she was the first female CEO in the history of Hearst, despite the fact that 80% of its magazine titles reach female audiences. So we kind of cooked the whole thing up, really, over gin and tonics, we always say. And I think Albright was the first time probably I've had a female equal but different co-founder, because the other businesses I'd done myself, who made me a better version of myself, where we could get very focused on where profit met purpose. It was also the best thing I've ever done and the worst thing I've ever done by a long way, because it's the business nobody wanted. And then pandemic, we had massive exposure to buildings in the US that we weren't able to get on a plane and manage. Everything shut down, the revenue zeroed, blah, 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 blah. But we found a solution. We had an exit in 2022. And I feel that that business made a difference, but there was some unfinished business, if you like. And it's always a bit like that for me, which is, I think, why I keep going, as I try to, with my therapist, understand why I do. And I also think I'm a very simple founder, in that every business I founded has been relevant to that decade of my life. And I like change. You meet amazing entrepreneurs, and I know many of them, who build a business and stick with it for 25 years. I've got 5 or 6 years of anything in me. And I think that's what makes me a very good founder, because I'm totally focused on the exit. And when you scale a business and take other people's money, it's not a charity, right? They're doing it because they want a return. So it's a long-winded answer to the question that Albright was about purpose. The Better Menopause for me really, really matters because of the stage of my life that I'm at, because I'm 51, because I got very sick when I was 48 and couldn't feel any better. And I've always been so hard driving in my life that feeling not like myself and feeling shitty and feeling like I couldn't perform, big lens for me has been performance. And I drive myself hard to perform, and I set myself pretty high standards. And I wasn't meeting those at 48. I got this horrible bacterial pneumonia and pleurisy sort of hospitalisation thing. And in the months that followed, trying to unpick why I felt so shitty, there was a light bulb moment for me seeing a gastroenterologist who told me that because my microbiome was so trashed, because I had 7 months on antibiotics, I was going to have terrible perimenopause symptoms because of my gut health. And that was the jumping off point for what became the Better Menopause, and our first product, the Better Gut, which is the first probiotic that we've got to develop for women in perimenopause and menopause. And we have another product called the Better Night, and we're launching Better Metabolism in a few weeks' time, and then a sex drive product. And so these things get momentum. It's not really about plugging the business. It's just saying that my happy place is recognizing that things that are happening in my life are happening in other women's life. That sort of stand for something. And how can I build a business that has purpose at its core? But I feel very strongly women need to get rich. Like, we have to stop bending over backwards to do things for free or say it's a social enterprise. I am very, very, very happy to ask for money and get paid what I'm worth. And when I build my businesses, I am very focused on having as many female investors as possible, because I want women to get rich. The gender pay gap begets the gender savings gap. We just don't have as much money as men. And sort of back to life lessons and family, and I've always held very strongly close to my heart that you have to be economically independent as a woman, because life can throw stuff at you, right? And it did at me, because I was a single mum when my kids were 3 and 1, and nobody asked for that. And so economic independence wasn't a choice, right? I think we do our best work as women when our backs are against the wall, but we need to really make sure that we've got our armour on. And getting our armour on, for me, has been about building businesses with purpose at their core that work.
Why do you think, listening to that, why do you think that women find it so hard to ask for money? Like what is it that is stopping women from growing their businesses? Because I as I say, I've seen you talk, I've seen other incredible co-founders talk, and it is that thing that there's just that awkward thing, and it does resonate with me when I first started like my own business. I was terrified of stuff, and then people are like, you're undervaluing everything. Like, why do we do that? And how, I guess if anyone's listening, how can we change that narrative for ourselves?
When I try to answer that question, I have to think about why do I not do it? Because I've never done it. And I do think that goes back to environment, that I think, and I have a daughter and a son, we have to get young girls comfortable with talking about money. And we have to talk to young girls about what things cost. And we have to encourage them to get comfortable with financial conversations. My kids are at really posh schools. And I'm still stunned how little financial literacy education there is at my daughter's school. So I think it can go back to that. But anything can be turned around, right? So honestly, the best thing you can do is just do it. And, and just practice. And practice is an important thing. Anna and I wrote a book called Believe, Build, Become, which is a woman's guide to supercharging their career. And it was published by Ebury in 2019. I think I get paid 6 pence for every book that gets sold, so this makes no difference to my life financially, but I would recommend checking it out.
Books never do, really, do they?
They don't do that. But why did we do it? So certainly was not to make money. We got asked, as high-profile female co-founders, we got asked the same questions over and over again by our community. How do I negotiate? How do I deal with imposter syndrome? How do I have an entrepreneurial mindset? How do I build a personal brand? Etc., etc., etc. And so the book, every chapter is written to answer one of those questions. And because AJ's magazines, it's written like, like the old school magazines where you used to tear out the thing at the end and fill it. So we've kind of written it like that. And we did it like that because it's okay to practice. We always say that all of our best off-the-cuff remarks are well-rehearsed. The beauty of having a female partner in crime, which I don't really at the moment, we have better menopause together, but AJ's the CEO of the Daily Telegraph and I have all these different jobs, board jobs and the thing I chair for the Chancellor, I'm sure we'll talk about it all. We game everything from dresses to delivery. Right? We talk about what we're going to wear, what we're going to say, who's going to say what, when there's difficult question, who's going to... And I think even if you're not going into battle with someone, you need your personal board of directors who you can workshop that stuff with. I still practice in front of the mirror. I really do. I'm on some big stages, Kate, and you know that, doing some sort of scary shit. I just speak without notes. That's my thing. But I don't speak without notes because I'm winging it. I speak without notes because I've stood in front of the mirror and done it 10 times, right? So you can do it. You just have to start and practice and find people you can practice with. Now, I'm not saying that men don't have a role in all of this. Of course they do. But I do find that I have a WhatsApp group of extremely high profile female founders who I shan't name, where everything goes on that, right? Yeah. I fucked this up. What does anyone think about this? Can anyone of us, you've got to have your version of that. And that's where the work gets done to give you the confidence. I also feel like part of the beauty of aging is I just don't really give a shit anymore. And younger me really cared about being liked. I'm a popular girl, I'm a nice person, I'm a great friend, but not everybody's going to like me. A lot of people who don't know me at all but see my stuff or on social have a view about me, and there's nothing I can do about that. And so I think Anna and I in our All Bright life would look at each other 5 times a day and say, Rhino, hi darling, and I think that has got a lot easier with age, definitely, versus when I was a 25-year-old boss, building this big business, hiring people. The imposter syndrome was off the charts for real reasons, which is I didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing it and nobody else was doing it. And so for that reason, you've got to back yourself.
Yeah. Do you know what? I get lost listening because I think so much of that will resonate with so many people who perhaps have had opportunities and they then haven't taken them. I think imposter syndrome is huge. I want to move on from that with what you're saying, because you mentioned earlier women and CEOs, and obviously we are focusing this on a menopause podcast. I think the other thing that generally tends to happen, and again, you're more in the workplace than I am, so correct me if I'm wrong, is that women build their careers, and just at a time when they're ready to kind of back themselves, menopause does hit. And obviously, you know, you relating to your story that you've just said, how do you feel, you know, women in the menopause in the workplace, how do we get over that hurdle? Because women are disappearing, and I think that's the point, isn't it? At a stage when we're ready to take full charge, perhaps invest in other businesses, we're at the top of the game, menopause hits. Like, how do we support that within companies? And to any woman, again, who might be listening to this, who is at that, you know, top of the game and is just thinking, I can't do this anymore because I don't feel like myself, I have got imposter syndrome, I'm finding brain fog overwhelming, I'm not sleeping, I'm finding all of these things really challenging. How can we encourage women to stay in the workplace and invest?
So I think the stat is that 25% of women in menopause think about leaving the workplace and 10% actually do. And I find that a hugely troubling stat, because as women, and my dog in the fight is often female founders. You know, I co-chair this initiative for the Chancellor called the Invest in Women Task Force, which is a way of me solving the issue that female entrepreneurs in the UK don't get backed. And in fact, the amount of capital last year that went to back a female founder in the UK was under 2%. 81% of all capital invested went to back an only male team. So we're just not at the table. Those stats have been pretty much like that for the last 25 years. And with the advent of some of the massive new business growth areas like AI, women just aren't founding AI businesses, and when they do, they're raising a tenth of the amount of capital as men. So, you know, this for me is a big part of how I spend my time and how I use my platform to talk about that. And the reason that's relevant is our fertility counts against us, right? Whether or not we have children. But if we do, even more so, you know, at every journey of a woman's life, our biology can often make it difficult for us to stay in work. You know, when I look back, because I get asked all the time, particularly my love home sort of life, which was making my fortune, I suppose. You know, I was a single mum. My kids were 3 and 1. I scaled this business when they were tiny. And there are lots of different versions of asking me how I did it. And the honest answer is, it was horrendous. It was super hard. I caught things up all the time. You know, it was the hardest time imaginable, but I had no choice because I think necessity is the mother of invention. And as a single parent, I was on the hook for the kids, right? And I'm very money motivated. I always have been. I think money buys freedom, and I think there's no harm in talking about that as a woman. When I was a younger girl, my grandmother said to me, you like nice things, because I've always liked dresses and shoes, as you know, Kate. You better earn some money to be able to buy them, right? You know, and I've always had jobs, Saturday jobs, side hustles. I see it in my daughter, who's a massive seller on Depop. She likes having cash in her hand. No harm in that, right? So what is the point for women in midlife, women in menopause, women above the age of 45? The big thing is, you don't need to feel shit. You know, it isn't like the conversation that I had nearly 4 years ago when I got sick, where nobody really knew what I was talking about. We have made huge strides in having conversations like this, led by people like you, Kate, to even put a name. I'd never heard of perimenopause when I was told I was in perimenopause. 4 years ago, I think it wasn't really a term. And I think you need to figure out your health solution that works for you, whatever that is. And for me, that's about HRT and getting my HRT right. It's about high quality supplements, you know, which I'm fortunate enough to manufacture, and figuring out how to take those alongside my HRT. It's about strength training, and Kate, I'm preaching to the choir here, but you know that's my big thing, and that's made a huge difference. I was an absolute cardio queen. All I did was run. All I did was try and burn calories and be as thin as possible. And going into 45, 46, 47, only doing HIIT and running, I felt awful. Now at 51 and a half, lifting heavy weights, I feel a lot better. Prioritising protein, prioritising greens. Anyway, this is all your stuff, Kate. But you know, I think you've got to put it into action, right? So it's a way of saying, I don't think you don't need to feel how I felt when I was 48. You can educate yourself, you can get support, you can make a decision on HRT, take high quality supplements, manage diet, exercise, and things I would never ever have done, like focus on breath work. I mean, for me that is like an insult. Say that to 48-year-old me was like, are you kidding? There aren't enough hours in the day to be doing that sort of stuff. I've had to change how I think about things, been forced to change and been forced to educate myself. How does that work for the world of work? I think things are changing, and I think businesses like the Better Menopause, where we've just closed an investment round, the business is doing really well, it's high profile, and we're talking to a lot of investors about this untapped space, about the power of 46-year-old women as consumers. I think markets move when investors move. So from an entrepreneurial perspective, I think there's a shift. From a workplace perspective, I think there is much more of a conversation about keeping high quality women in work. But what I would say is, I hate the word pivot, but change, development. 48, I was a full-time CEO of a business that had raised a ton of private equity capital. 51, I have a portfolio, right? I have the Better Menopause, I chair the Investing Women Task Force, I'm on the board of Channel 4, I work with private equity. So I've changed my life, how I work. And partly I've changed it because I want flexibility. For me, flexibility doesn't mean like lots of time off. So I'm not very good at that. I really love work. I'm lucky with that. And also I wake up really early. So what the hell would I do all day, right? So I like to be useful. That's a big thing for me. But it's neuroplasticity. So I have really recognized that in my 50s, at least for now, I want to do a range of different things. And I want to have a red thread through that. And the red thread for me is female economic empowerment. I've just had enough of it, Kate. I've got a voice, I've got a profile, I've got an address book, I want to use it because I want to make a difference for our daughters and our sons, but for the women who are coming up behind me. You know, I go to this same gym every day, Kate, and I'm twice everybody's age in there. And
I love that.
The girls talk to me all the time and they're amazing. I feel like their mum, you know. They're doing things, they're trying things that I think that we, because of social media and because of the understanding around monetizing your skills and your assets, I don't think we need to worry about our daughters. I think they're coming into the world of work better equipped than we are, but the world has not moved around them, right? So for all of those reasons, I want to advocate for women from a young age through to my age, through to older. And I want them to be in the world of work in the way that they want to be. And I want them to be economically independent. Because when you're not economically independent as a woman, you live a life of compromise.
Yeah. Do you know, it's interesting. So I was listening to you at the very beginning when you answered that about being money motivated. And again, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think that for so many people, they would be not ashamed, but it seems like, you know, you want to be coy about, you know, sort of thing. I'm money motivated. You know, it's not just something someone would shout. Like we were taught, or you know, some of us, a lot of women, I think, in this demographic, you know, be small, don't be seen, don't be heard, fit in. And you know, this is so empowering because it's changing, and it's like we shouldn't be ashamed of having the same and of wanting the same. But, you know, there does still seem to be, you know, and it annoys me, the gender pay gap, the gender health gap. I mean, both, and you're sitting across both really with, you know, what you do in business and then obviously with, you know, the Better Menopause. You're very aware of both of those. It's like how every time I feel like it is being challenged and we are making steps forward, I feel like sometimes it is, you know, one step forward, two steps back. And I'm looking recently at some I mean, you know, we touched on it at the last talk you were at. You know, women are living for longer in poorer health. Yeah. And there's such a disconnect somewhere. And I know if we could find the answer, you know, it would be amazing. But like, how do we encourage women, I guess, to keep challenging that? Because I had actually a meeting this morning, which I'll talk to you about offline. You know, it's this collaborative, we need to be collaborating together as one big voice for women to drive it forward. And, you know, they're doing that. It's like, how do we pull people with us?
I think women's networks really matter. I've thought that since Albright. And I think we need to keep at it. We are stronger together. There's some really basic tools as well. I'm in a lot of big meetings that are very male. And I will be very mindful of the other women in the room. And when they say something, I will quickly lean in to say, what she said is really important. We can collaborate in meetings, but I think I come back to, you've got to switch off that inner voice. You always have to think, what would a man do? That doesn't mean you need to do it like a man.
Yeah.
And I've really learned a lot on that from Anna, actually, because I would say she was the exemplar of soft power. She's sort of tiny and blonde and, and she's so good at getting to outcomes like that. That's why we're a good team. I'm much more like bang the table and kind of stand up. But I think that we can get there in our own way, but we have to speak truth to power. I feel that's an important part of my role, actually. I did the Women in Equality Select Committee last week. Select committees really do get the blood racing, even for me, I have to say. And, I think these conversations are live conversations, but the data speaks for itself. Yeah. And we have to keep showcasing the data, and we have to make sure that we're having those conversations in rooms with men, not just to one another, in rooms with men, because that's how we drive change. And all of this, when I talk about my stuff, the point I really want to make, you asked me about purpose. Purpose really matters to me. It's what gets me out of bed. But none of this is a charity, right? Women-led businesses deliver 35% better returns than male-led businesses of way smaller amounts of capital deployed. We're just a good economic bet. So we have to keep telling that story, and we have to keep reminding ourselves of that point, and we have to ask. Somebody said to me very early in my career, when you're negotiating, think of a number that makes you blush and double it. And and I really do stick to that, actually. So I think little things like that and just doing it. One of the things that gives me comfort and sometimes gets me into trouble is, what's the worst that can happen? And I think you just need to constantly ask yourself every day, what's the worst that can happen? Somebody says no, I reframe it, but you have to ask. You've got to put your head above the parapet.
I love that. You've got to keep knocking on doors. I'm going to come into that because actually, you are, you are involved in funding female founders. What if someone is listening? What advice would you give? I'm going to go with a midlife woman because we're basing on midlife. They're sitting on a business idea, but they might be feeling it's too late, or they don't know kind of where to start. What advice would you give somebody?
Well, you have to start. And I think the thing is that I get asked a lot about women in investment, partly because I chair the task force that's just raised £255 million to back female investors. It's the biggest funding pot in the world, but it's not a charity, right? And so for your business to be investment worthy, you have to start. And essentially, what are you trying to figure out? Can it make money? I'm going to be really kind of like basic on this now. Yeah. Can you build a business that makes you and others money? Is there a product market fit where if you're bringing a product or a service to market, the cost of doing that is less than the cost that you make from selling it? And and it comes back to the same point. You just have to start, right? What's the worst that can happen? But if you don't start, you won't know. The majority of capital that's raised for a business in its very early stages is from friends and family. And women often don't have as good a network as men, right, in order to raise that money. They also, because of the gender pay gap, have less savings. But if you don't try and see whether your dream is an actual thing, then you'll never know. But you have to make a reasonable amount of headway with something before you can get people to invest. So it is that bit. So to look at something like the Better Menopause, how do I go from X to Y, or Love Home Swap or anything, but I'll take Better Menopause because it's the most recent. Yeah. So, I'm in a doctor's office and he says this thing about the microbiome and women in midlife and perimenopause. And so I get quite obsessed with details because I'm a nerd, really. So I'm like, hang on, say that again. And then I get my laptop. He obviously thinks I'm crackers, right? So I'm like writing this stuff down. And I'm like, okay. So then I leave. And then, so number one is, have a moment, whether you're on a plane watching a film or whether you're in a doctor's office, have the moment. And are you so obsessed with the idea that you can't sleep at night because you're thinking about it. I have a kind of goosebump test. Like, I think this is a thing. And then have your process. So my process was, I phone AJ and I say, I've had an idea, this, and this. And she's quite used to this. And, we'll sometimes say, like...
Do I answer that? It's like...
Yeah, well, what she want to... Oh, shit. No, and we're like, it's good, right? So then I do the work. So the work is, what is this? Who do I know? How can I find someone? Right. So then there's a process of like a couple of weeks where I dig around obsessively on gut health and manufacturers and supplement manufacturers. And I put together my pitch, right? Which is my script. And I get a little bit of a deck going. And then I just approach people. But I'm fortunate, I have worked hard to have a really good network. I really hammer my LinkedIn. And for people who follow me, you'll see it. And sometimes it's exhausting. But it does really mean that I'm kind of one connection away from pretty much anyone.
Yeah.
So then I find the supplements manufacturer and I talk to them and I do a thing, and then I find them, we've got to have someone to do formulation. So quite quickly, because I'm obsessing, we get from, gut health menopause to we found someone who can make a product. We found a nutritionist and a GP who can help us to formulate. And I've been so convincing about what I think the opportunity is. And I've got some of the costs in, and I've had this little Excel, and I've got a thing that we get the supplements manufacturer to agree to invest.
Yeah.
Right. And then we model and we need more money. And then so we've got an advantage. We've got a network. We understand tax efficiencies, which, without being boring, if you're thinking about founding a business, you really need to understand SEIS and EIS, look it up. But it's basically one thing the UK does really well is offer tax incentives to investors that mean it de-risks their investment into a high growth business. So in other words, for the first £250,000 worth of capital that you raise as a founder, the investors get half of that back as a tax relief, and their downside is almost completely protected if it doesn't work. So we probably went from gut health, microbiome, to having some money, a product, a formulation thing. It probably took about 3 months. And Anna and I also invested.
Yeah.
So that's my process, because if it's not exciting enough for me to be completely obsessed, it's not good enough. Because this is particular to me. I'm always the front person for my stuff, partly because I'm always my lowest cost of sales, right? I have the beauty of being free. So if I can't sell it and I can't say, this is what I think the opportunity is, 40 to 60-year-old women coming into their power, there's a lot of meno-washing crap out there. We need to scientifically develop, blah, blah, blah. If I can't do that and feel like I can't think about anything else, it's not a business. Yeah. And if I can't convince people to give me their money, it's not a business. So that's my version of how you get it off the ground.
Yeah, and I think that's that. I mean, I'm a testament to the products, and I think, again, like you've just said, that meno-washing thing. Yeah. It is difficult. I mean, let's. I know we are pushed for time, but I think that is kind of quite an important part, because obviously the supplement market, which you are now in with this product and obviously launching a new one, I don't feel like, I think it's the meno-washing. Do you feel like you've got caught up in that, or do you feel like you've avoided that? How have you navigated the fact that there are a million products trying to target, I guess, women in midlife?
Yeah, by only doctor developing products where the ingredients are extremely high quality, scientifically backed, and more expensive. So we're a lower margin product than some of the stuff that's out there.
The snake poison that's out there.
Yeah, and we're about to embark upon clinical trials for better gut and better metabolism. So like really investing in science, in manufacturing, in quality of ingredients. We're kept very honest by Dr. Harper and Joe, sometimes like painfully so, because, there's like a tension, isn't there, between we just need to get it out. We need to, and so, for example, better metabolism, I don't really know if I'm allowed to talk about it yet. Anyway.
We'll release this after.
One of our hero ingredients is berberine in a really, really high dose, high quality dose. There was a global berberine shortage that's delayed the product by 8 months. You know, my instinct a little bit can be, oh fuck it, can we not just like do it without it? No, you know, we need this. So I think there's that healthy tension, and I think then it's how you show up in the world. You know, our marketing is very driven by, I suppose, 3 different levers. The first is experts, and we're about to start working with a doctor in the US. So experts who hold us to account on formulations and who have deep science on why these ingredients in these quantities in this way will work and why other stuff doesn't. So that's important and a bit time consuming. The second is consumer case studies, you know, which we don't pay for. It's people who genuinely love the product. I think we've developed real love products. And I think that this education conversation around gut health and menopause has got a lot further to go, because I think it's still not very well known. And I suppose the third thing, which is slightly orcs, but I've just made my peace with it, is me. Because I think people are interested in me and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and how, and kind of the founder story, but also this sort of performance thing. And you are very used to what it's like to continually have your pitch taken in your gym kit. You know, I don't love it, but I'm kind of like used to it now. So I think people want to know, because they genuinely want to know what you do. And I think speaking honestly about things that have been really hard, things that have been mistakes, challenges that you've overcome, why you are where you are, and why you founded the business, that is all 1,000% authentic. And I hope it comes across that way, that genuinely, I only ever found businesses, and not all founders are like this, but I'm really simple, that I can keep getting out of bed for, because they make a difference to my life and other women's lives. And I think that's what gives you your true north.
I love that. And actually, it pulls me back to a conversation that I had actually earlier this week as well, which I think some people, they don't know that backstory. They don't know the graft that's gone behind it. They don't know the sacrifices. You know, and again, I think sometimes it's just that version, and nobody has any idea of actually, you know, I didn't just wake up one morning and, you know, it all fell into my lap. No, it's been years of hard work. And I'm going to just ask one more question, because we talked about this sort of earlier. I can't even remember whether it was when we were on or not. But obviously, you've talked about your kids. You've talked about you know, all of that. And I know one of the things we were talking about was sort of stress of exams and da-da-da. And I think, again, for a lot of women who are, you know, in business or wanting to do business, especially in midlife. And I think this was somewhere where I definitely found myself, you know, 2 years ago, and my dad, I was his main carer and trying to start up owning the menopause. And then I had young kids, and actually my youngest also has a lung condition. It is that sadly, as women, again, we are often the glue that holds everybody together, the giver of the family, emotionally, physically, you know, whether that's, as I say, in that emotional capacity or the taxi driver capacity, or, you know, cooking, like how do you navigate, I guess, like the mum guilt side? Because I think that holds a lot of people back from fulfilling their potential, because they feel guilty. And I would absolutely hold my hands up and say I am fully in that category of mum guilt, as my youngest embarks on week 3 of an Easter camp, because I'm working and I love my work, and I don't want, you know, I love my work. I don't feel like why do I have to justify, you know, I love my work, so I love my work and that's how it's working. But I know that a lot of people will have, you know, that kind of like mum guilt and not forge forward.
Yeah. I don't have it. I don't. I just don't. Because what is the choice? My kid, I pay for my kid. You know, like this, I have economic clarity. They have only known this life.
Yeah.
They have only known this life. On the occasions when I've then been in between a thing, or I've kind of turned up at school, or they're a bit like, what are you doing here, right? So they've only known this life. Now, that's a glib answer. I prioritise all the shit we prioritise, right? Yeah. I've never missed a lacrosse match. My daughter plays England lacrosse. I've never, you know, I do it all. I get up really early. In an ideal world, you know, maybe I go to the gym an hour later, but I get up, I have my whole routine with them. Part of the reason this portfolio life works during this ridiculous GCSE year, as we were discussing, I have to come home to check my son's actually doing any revision, right? So I've got all the issues that anybody has. I've got resources to be able to handle it, which I have earned for myself. And I do feel it's not a Hillary Clinton, I could have stayed home and baked cookies, because, you know, that's that got her into a lot of trouble. But I do feel like I can, so I should. I feel like I have a role to play in life. I like being in the arena.
Yeah.
I like it, right? I am skilled, educated and experienced at age 51 to be in the arena. And women, if given the chance, need to grab it with both hands and worry about it later, right? They really, really do. I am not saying no to things because of my kids. I'm not. You know, the only thing that was the biggest nightmare was having to fly to LA, which I did twice a month for 3 years. That was awful for them and awful for me. So I've dialed back international. That is really difficult when you're away a lot. But I think I have a really fulfilling, lucrative, motivating, meaningful life. I am in the world. They are better for me being in the world. That is where I'm happy. What else would I do with my time? They are at school. My daughter boards. My son's at day school. I go to the theatre with them every week. I'm on the board of the Women's Prize for Fiction. I have curated my life to fulfil my passions and build their life. Is it perfect? No. My daughter's got ADHD. Like, we've got all the stuff, of course, aging parents, like everything that is just the reality of our age and stage. But I am better for having a fulfilling, lucrative, meaningful work life. End of. And I don't feel guilty about that.
And I think it's and you know what? And I actually think, you know, it's that thing, sort of that, like, lead by example. Like, I actually think, like, as you're saying, you know, your whole core and your drive and your purpose is this female-led business. Like, what a better role model for your daughter and for your son, right? To see that women are capable. Because I often think when, you know, I have conversations like this, I'm always like, well, my daughter, and I'm actually like, no, do you know what? Actually, my son will see that he can be a good leader, a good employee, an employer, a supportive partner of any of the things that I'm bringing to the forefront of a conversation. Because again, we talked about women collaborating, you know, and doing it together. Actually, we do need to bring, and as you said, we need to bring men into all of these conversations as well to make sure that it does progress at a faster rate than it currently is.
Agreed.
Love that. I'm going to ask you one last question because I know that you have to head out. So if you could leave every listener with one message about menopause and work, or menopause, what would it be?
I think that this is the best half of our lives. And if you're not feeling like it's the best half of your life, get more help.
Yeah.
Really, it's that. I honestly think my 50s is going to be awesome, with challenges, but with a ton of upside. And a lot of that comes from being exactly where I am and exactly where I'm meant to be. But it's because I have really taken the time to ask for help, to say that I don't feel great, to spend time investing in that, to tweak, to change, to investigate, okay, to go and build a business to solve for the thing I couldn't find. That's very me. But I think this should be your better half. And if it isn't, then get help.
I love that, and I, as you know, wholeheartedly agree with that. I'm excited. I'm 50 next year, and I'm so excited. Like, it's, you know, I almost keep telling people I'm 50 because I just want to get
Yeah. Oh no, I say all the time. Yeah.
I'm 55. It's like, you've been 55 for 5 years. I swear that's what happens anyway, isn't it? You stay at an age for a while. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for everything you are doing, you know, for women and championing and driving us forwards. You're brilliant, and I love this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kate.
Thank you.